This podcast discusses themes of mental health, which some people may find emotive, such as suicide or other adult-themed content. The information contained in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. All views expressed are solely those of individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which we have been, are now, or will be affiliated. The information is not meant to diagnose or treat any mental health condition. If you're experiencing mental health symptoms, we encourage you to contact a mental health service within your community. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek the relevant support and interventions by presenting to your local accident and emergency department or contacting the relevant emergency services.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Welcome to The Man Hug, the monthly men's mental health podcast. I'm Dean McShane.
I'm Dan Cooper.
I'm Ian Pearce-Hayes.
And I'm Conleth Kelly.
Each month we will discuss a different topic related to men's mental health, which will include a guest speaker who will discuss their own personal story. And each month we will also be showcasing an organisation or charity within the Merseyside area who work within mental health to help build your signposting skills. Hello and welcome to this month's Man Hug. This month's theme is the arts and we're joined by three more fantastic guests. Today we're joined by musician Mersey Wylie, filmmaker Martin Wallace, who will be joining us later to talk about Ron Gittins and Ron's Place. And we'll also hear from Tim Taylor of Liverpool Indie Choir, who will be telling us all about their 1,000 Voice fundraiser. So our first guest is musician Mersey Wylie. Mersey, welcome to the Man Hug.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's really lovely to have you here with us. So first off, what we always do with our guests is just get them to give us a little bit of biographical history in their own words, really.
Okay. So I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm based here in Liverpool, and I'm also a choir leader. I run a couple of choirs, both with a mental health focus, actually. So really fitting to be here today. And I've written a lot about my mental health over the years. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting today.
Brilliant. One of the things that first sort of made us go, quick, we need to get Mersey on, was what you were saying there about your first EP, which was all about your own mental health journey. Mm-hmm. It's such a powerful thing to do, and a brave thing to do is put your words down on music. How did you find that whole process?
Well, the writing of it I found really, relatively easy. It was so cathartic. It was just, that's the only way I know how to write, is just what's happening for me. And it was only really once I started, putting it out and having conversations about it that I realised how vulnerable of a thing that it was when I was actually having to talk about it. Yeah. Because I find that when I'm especially writing, but even performing, it's, the song is like a vehicle, so it's open to interpretation, and it doesn't feel quite so raw, but having conversations about it was like, oh yeah, I really need to, either step up and be very open here, or figure out how I want to talk about it, I suppose.
So how did that sort of go then? Did you find that you'd done that, you'd put it out there for the public, and now you needed to sort of like deal with it yourself? Yeah,
and I think, I think conversations around mental health are so important. I'm such an advocate for that, and so it was sort of backing up my own beliefs, I suppose, in being able to talk about it. And I've never hidden the fact that I've struggled with my mental health, but I suppose talking about it really bluntly is a different thing. So it was definitely a journey, but I'm really glad that I have. And obviously, every time anyone speaks up about their mental health, it always has a knock-on effect with other people and stuff. So yeah, I've really appreciated that as well.
That's amazing. And just what you're saying there about being honest and talking about it is a really powerful thing, and why we're all here today.
Totally,
the Man Hug, it's exactly what we do, is we're trying just to normalise the conversation.
Exactly.
Get men to open up and talk, and to reach out and accept support and help when they need it. So
absolutely.
with your own sort of story and your own journey there, did you find that as well, that there was maybe someone you'd have to go and talk to following talking about all of this openly?
Yeah.
Or
I mean, I think I've always been able to talk like with my partner, and I've been in therapy for many years and things like that, but I think being able to just have conversations more openly, but also then extending that out into my friendship groups and sort of being able to open those conversations up a little bit further, that was a learning experience for me. But in doing that as well, you sort of, I think, like you say, the normalizing of it allows everyone to sort of start, figuring out how to react to that, and how to open up themselves and have more honest conversations. And I really valued that. It just, I think it just makes communication clearer. Even just simple things as being able to say, I can't come out today because I'm not having a good mental health day, rather than drumming up some random excuse, is really empowering and really, honest, I suppose. So, yeah.
Amazing. How did you sort of find, sort of like fellow musicians and people around you from that industry? How did they sort of like take it? I
think it's one of those things that as soon as you start talking about, everyone's got their own journeys with their mental health and their own experiences. And I think especially within the music industry, it's that kind of strange dichotomy in that music or art or any sort of expression is so valuable for mental health and is so crucial for so many people, but at the same, and can be so uplifting, but at the same time, the actual industry can be a really difficult place. It can be a really lonely journey, and so the sort of balancing those two things is, I think the more people that talk about it, the better, basically.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? It's something we've spoke on the podcast in the past about the music industry in particular. How it can be a lonely place, and we've spoke about sort of like isolation and people living within the four walls of a tour bus and hotel rooms and dark and not seeing the dead, all of these things that sort of like everyday sort of occupational hazards, aren't they, really? So I think getting yourself out there with an album around opening up and talking, it's such a valuable thing.
Absolutely.
In terms of what you've learned from that process, what would you recommend to other people, about getting your emotions down in some form, whether it is music or...
I mean, I think if you can find some sort of outlet for, for anything that you're going through, it's just, it just sort of takes the burden off you. Like carrying everything all the time is such a heavy thing to do. And so any sort of, for me, creativity has always been... the way that I deal with things, whether it's through, song, which is what I do in my entire life, but I also, I craft a lot, and or going and experiencing things with other people, like all that sort of thing. It's so valuable. And I always think, like, the way that I think about music or just creativity in general and mental health, it's sort of, there are kind of the two parts of it that are so important. There's the immediate effect of, like, whether it's the catharsis of it or whether it's the uplift of, just making some music or making something or doing something with other people or whatever it might be. But then there's the sort of the long-term effects of what that can bring, whether that's, an outlet or opening up conversations, or whether that's just finding community and, like, putting it into part of your daily life. So it's not just, because I think, around mental health, it's so important that the fixes that we're looking for, I don't like that word, but, in inverted commas, that we're looking for aren't just these sort of quick fixes, which can be great in sort of breaking a pattern, but they can also be these sort of long-term things that make actual, long-term effects in your life. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, yeah. It's such an interesting point. One of the things you mentioned there around sort of like a community as well. So you mentioned, like, you lead choirs.
Yeah.
The amount of things I've read around the value of participating in things like choirs, because, like, you have your own support network, you create your own community. So what types of things are you finding from running the choir?
I've loved choir music my whole life. I've been a part of choirs my whole life, and I've found community through them. When I first moved to Liverpool, I joined Sense of Sound. It was the first thing that I did, and that was my immediate friendship circle and my immediate, social life and support. And I'm so grateful for that. And, this is 15 years later. And people in that choir are still my best friends, in the world. So it was so invaluable to me. And I just knew the power, it's a lovely thing to do, just coming and singing together. It's but there's so much power in community in general, and in whichever way you can find it. And I think singing is a brilliant icebreaker, a brilliant leveler for people. Obviously Sense of Sound is like a more professional organization, but community choirs are brilliant. They're just they're a brilliant way to, and I know you're talking to Tim from the Indie Choir as well, but they're just a brilliant way of bringing people together and just creating an environment where you can sort of, let things go. And there are brilliant health benefits to singing and singing together anyway. And so it's kind of, it's a great vehicle, I suppose, for creating some of those more long-term helpful effects.
What would you be your big selling pitch for anyone who might be listening who thinks, I've heard there's a choir down the road or whatever, but they're a bit anxious about attending? Why should we encourage people to sing, do you think?
It's just, obviously, I would say, if you think you can't sing and that's the thing that's holding you back, then, you need to turn that around, because so many people that go to choirs feel like they can't sing. Singing in a group is such a different thing than singing on your own anyway. Safety in numbers, if nothing else. And there's just the power of singing together. I'm sure there are people who have experienced that just at the football match or at a concert. It's just such an elating feeling. And, if you're in a group, no one's really going to notice if you're singing quite quietly at first. But it's just a really, it's a wonderful way to just connect with people without having to sort of navigate initially what the common ground might be, I suppose. So I'd say give it a go. Find a nice, welcoming community choir, something. There are so many different styles of community choirs as well. So, they're not all classical. There's loads of pop and rock and indie choirs and all the rest. So I'd say musical theatre, all of that. So, find something that maybe suits you, and then there are so many choirs in the UK. You'll be fine.
It's amazing. From the choirs you've run, what types of things have you seen from people that come and attend? Because we speak a lot on here about the power of connectivity and community, and it's not just about attending the football group or the music group or the whatever it is. It's what happens afterwards.
Yeah,
Are you seeing the same types of things with choirs?
Absolutely. So I run 2 choirs at the moment. In person, which are I run a choir for PSS, which is the Mental Health Wellbeing Choir, and I run the Liverpool Choir with No Name, which is a choir for people affected by homelessness or mental health, addiction, recovery, and or who are otherwise marginalised. And it's just both choirs obviously have very specific kind of goals, but at the end of the day, they're just lovely environments to sing together, and they're just that. They're just that vehicle for community. With my mental health choir, it's now. That group, it's quite a small group, but most of them spend the whole week together. They'll sort of go around different groups. They'll go to a ukulele group, there's a gardening group, they'll meet up and sing songs in at the Brink or whatever it is. There's and with Choir with No Name, we've seen, I've been with them for 10 years now, and we've seen so many journeys, of people that have come to us or that are still with us, and it's been incredible to watch. It's really been incredible to watch the power of music on that bigger scale, because obviously I know it for myself personally, and when you connect with a song something like that, it feels great. But when you really see people come into a room at the beginning and finding a safe space where they can open up, where they can become more confident, and how that can then, and where they can build community, and how that can then spill into other parts of their lives, it's just really impressive.
It's such a lovely thing to be part of.
Yeah,
yourself,
it is.
To see people come in who may be a bit nervous at first, and to see them grow and form connections with other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just always the reason that I love working with choirs, and I always say it very openly, is I get as much out of it as I give, or that other people get. And there have been so many times where I've been having a really tough time, and I know that obviously it's not always possible to pull yourself out of dark spaces and go into things, but most of the time choirs have always been a really safe space for me as well, and a way I know that walking in the room, no matter what's going on, as soon as we all start singing together and that energy exchange starts happening, because, you know, when you've got a room full of, whether it's 10 people or 50 people or whatever it is, there's just a natural energy exchange, and we all sort of just start uplifting each other. And I know that I always come out of it feeling better than when I went in. So that's always been really comforting and really helpful to me as well.
I think that's the best sales pitch for joining choir I've ever heard, to be honest. Should we all join one, boys?
Yes, you definitely should.
That's amazing. But I think, you know, that phrase, it's a safe space, I think for a lot of people that can be a huge motive to come and do this, you know, of having somewhere where they feel that they'll be able to talk with people that maybe experience the same things, or, you know, you're not judged and everything else, which is so powerful.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. And I think, you know, we always work really hard to make sure that our spaces are as open and inclusive as possible, but that's something that everyone fosters together, you know. And I think sort of, you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that thing of just being open and honest can create that in every room, you know, like if everyone's sort of it's so difficult being vulnerable, but when everyone does, like, it's sort of that leveler, isn't it? Like, you know, everyone knows that they're safe to share themselves fully as well. And I think that's such a hard thing to do, to you know, to bear all of yourself and know that you're not going to be judged for it, I think is a really, really powerful thing. So, yeah. That's
so inspirational. Amazing. I think, we've got Tim coming on later from Liverpool Indie Choir, and again we're going to touch on a lot of the themes of similar things.
Absolutely,
really, but that's amazing. Just going back to what we were talking about earlier with your own sort of musical career and that. One of the big reports that came out last year, I think it was from the Musicians Union, was on how poor mental health can be for professional musicians basically across the UK. What sort of things would you put that down to? You know, what from looking in from, you know, someone that's been there at that level, what sort of things would you say are big causes for this?
I think obviously musicians is such a broad spectrum. Like there's so many different like career paths and things that would facilitate that. But I mean, I think things that a lot of musicians would experience would be financial insecurity, you know, would be a huge one. I think a lot of us would have an understanding of that. And the music industry can be particularly fickle. And even if you're doing sort of, you know, covers gigs, or a lot of musicians will be at least part-time freelance, which is just unstable, can be very seasonal as well. You know, it's amazing to be vulnerable, but it can also leave you a little bit raw. And I think if you've not got the right support around you, or you're not feeling that support at least, you know, that can be a really difficult thing to navigate as well. Making music can be, like we've touched on before, really lonely. I love writing, but there comes a point where I'm spending a lot of time in a room on my own, and you're kind of, you know, the industry in particular is really set up for you to always be looking for external validation, and that's a really difficult thing to be okay around. You know, like when you're having conversations that are saying, well, your numbers aren't good enough, or, you know, we need to hit certain you know, points or whatever, and that's the value that you're putting on, or whether, or you know, there's a monetary value that you're putting on your music. That's really difficult to put that on a creative outlet. You know, like the thing in and of itself, the making of the music is a beautiful thing and can be a really lovely and supportive thing to do. But when you start adding those external values to it, it's just really difficult to navigate, I think. And then, you know, the industry itself can be, you know, and like you said, like you touched on touring. I've not done a lot of touring, but again, that's can be a very difficult thing to navigate. You're outside of, a lot of things are outside of your control, and I think there's lots of facets to it, but I think there's lots of things that, you know, a lot of musicians would sort of be able to relate to each other on. It's not set up for. It's not. I don't think health is at the primary of what, you know, especially if we're talking on a bigger scale, like what labels and that sort of thing are really thinking about. Like the artists are the product, and so what their like mental health and physical health aren't really the priority. It's just getting that product. So, that ain't good.
No. We spoke about Tonic, a mental health charity set up for professional musicians in the past, and the ambassador is Terry Hall from the Specials.
Yeah, amazing.
And, it just shows that something like that's needed, and something else needs to be done at an earlier point, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's been the same with sports professionals for years, and
exactly.
it always takes like either a fatality or something for anyone to do anything about it. Really,
And I think that's so true across the board, especially with health, both physical and mental health. I think we're getting better at like starting to have those conversations or having better reactions to when things are happening, maybe, when people are having mental breakdowns, we're maybe not stigmatizing them as much as we used to, or the press isn't, or whatever it might be. But like you say, we need to start putting better things in place before we're getting to that point. We need to be, the system needs to change, in so many various ways.
It's just so difficult, isn't it, when you as the artist want it to be all about the artistic sort of experimentation and writing the songs, but as soon as you do get to a certain point, it becomes about business.
Of course.
And that's the difficult offset in your own mind of, well, I need the business to actually keep doing the art, and it's kind of that circle of doom sometimes that you find yourself in. And then the other thing is performing live, the sort of the endorphins that are released when you're performing live in front of somebody. So you're doing that every night if you're on tour, and then you're going back to your hotel room, and the amount of like famous artists over the years that have been found, unfortunately, taking their own lives, whatever, in hotel rooms, because it's just that massive crash.
It's such,
after the release of such a lot of endorphins. So.
Absolutely, it's a really difficult thing to navigate those massive highs and lows, and I find that even just from directing a choir, like I get such a rush, and then I have to come home afterwards and be like, oh, I need to figure out how to have a safe landing afterwards, because it's it's a lot to put your body through, and performing on massive stages is just like another level of that, isn't it? So
we had
absolutely
Dr. Seiss from the Boo Radleys, and he was telling us that from going to Glastonbury to all of a sudden having your record label cancel your deal and things, and then you're back taking the kids to school and stuff, and it was how much of a shock to the system that was.
Absolutely.
So totally understandable.
Yeah.
Just on that point you were making there though about the huge benefits of performing in particular, it is something I'm going to touch on with Tim as well, because we do have colleagues who have engaged in the choir, and they've said to us exactly the same thing, how much of a rush it gives them, and how the sense of achievement, especially if you're sort of like someone who's particularly nervous about performing, and then you go off and you sing with your choir.
Yeah, absolutely.
That must just be the biggest rush ever, mustn't
it?
It
is. And it's such a nice way into it as well, singing in a choir, because like you say, you've got that safety in numbers, so being like, some people are very confident at karaoke and things like that, but it's a very exposing thing to do, especially singing. It's part of your body. It's there's I used to play instruments, and I went to uni playing the saxophone, and when I switched to singing when I moved here, I did my audition for Sense of Sound. And I'd done auditions on the saxophone many, many times. And it was so scary, because I'm like, it's literally me. It's, there's no like, oh, my instrument's a bit off today. It's like, oh, just me. But, when you're in a group of people, you're all supporting each other. And it's such a lovely way to get that rush, like you say, but without the kind of as much pressure, I should say, without as much pressure.
That's such an amazing selling point, again, for looking in the community for what your local choir is, or where you can go to sing with other people, because we do know if we achieve something, we do get that huge rush of dopamine. It's incredible achievement, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And Ian sings an amazing Meatloaf for karaoke.
Now, really?
So in terms of your own choirs, can people get involved?
So PSS is through is through the PSS service, but Choir with No Name, we're always open to members and volunteers. You can get in touch and find out more about that. And I also work with the Sofa Singers, which is like an online singing community, which is amazing. So we meet twice a week, Tuesday nights and Friday mornings here in the UK. Online, it's a big global community that I run with my friend James Sills, who's another amazing choir leader. And that's a really nice way of, getting involved with something from the comfort of your home. If you're a little bit, the mute button is always on because of Zoom's limitations. So it's a nice way of, just singing in your home without anyone else hearing you. And it's a really beautiful community as well, actually. And it's a nice way to sort of find your way into things. But also really accessible, obviously, if you can't, whether it's childcare or other accessibility needs that you can't get out to a physical choir. It's a nice way of connecting with people and singing. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's a great...
And I love that because there's often a lot of barriers for people to join in and things. And a great example in Liverpool, I harp on about them all the time, the Liverpool Dementia Choir. I think they're just absolutely incredible.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely amazing.
I've seen them live quite a few times now, haven't we, at events, and they're just changing lives.
Absolutely
amazing.
Yeah, and again, showing the power of music, in a totally different way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So for yourself, what things have you got coming up?
Well, I've just finished recording a new EP, so I've got a new single coming out next month, which is very exciting, and the full EP will be out early next year.
What's it called? Plug it.
It hasn't been announced yet. It's called Woman.
Next month.
Yeah, exactly. That should all be on my socials in the next, should be starting up in the next few weeks. But yeah, next month first single will be out, which I'm really excited. I've been working on a music video with Marika Macklin, who's an amazing director, and it's talking. There's always themes of my mental health through everything I do, but also talking a lot about sort of just experience as a woman and the lovely world that we live in. So next month, fingers crossed.
Amazing, thank you so much. I think this is everything that we wanted for this podcast, is to have someone who's as passionate as yourself about mental health, but again, giving people options and giving people some choices, and especially that whole important thing about getting your thoughts and feelings down creatively, whether it is through music, poetry, art. This is the type of things we're going to be discussing on this podcast, but I think we've learned so much from that. But absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy. Thank you.
And we'll be plugging your single next month as
well.
Thank you. Fabulous. Thanks so much, Mersey.
Thank you.
Cheers.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
So chaps, the arts, what do we know about it and why should it be used for our mental health? I like this quote from Pablo Picasso: "Art washes from the soul the dust of everyday life." What do you think of that? It's quite nice, isn't it? Yeah, it's quite nice.
He stole that from me.
Did he? Okay. Well, so the Mental Health Foundation, they state that engaging in the arts seems to be growing in popularity as a way to improve our well-being. Participating in the arts can enable people to deal with a wide range of mental ill health conditions and psychological distress. The best part is that it helps people to improve their mental health through creativity. Making art is helping many people express themselves without having to use words. The arts can create a feeling of community, which, again, we've got the perfect guests for that today around things like choirs and art groups. But yeah, it helps you feel part of something. It helps you to get in touch with others, and it helps in alleviating loneliness and isolation. It can help to boost your confidence and make us feel more engaged and resilient. And besides these benefits, studies have found that art engagement also alleviates anxiety, depression and stress. There's increasing amount of scientific evidence that proves art enhances brain function as well. It has an impact on brainwave patterns and emotions, the nervous system, and can actually raise serotonin levels, which again, we're always talking about serotonin levels on the Man Hug. Art can change a person's outlook and the way they experience the world. And in the UK, through social prescribing, we've been referring people to local activities since the mid-90s. As such, there's plenty of evidence that art and heritage social prescribing actually works. Art also triggers a response in our brain's reward system. The act of creating things actually stimulates dopamine. It produces this amazing sense of pleasure and motivation to continue our artistic endeavour, whether it's writing a poem, a song, completing a painting, or the achievement of completing a performance. So I had a look to see how easy it is to find information on how to engage in the arts in your local community. And I found that the two biggest sort of websites around this are the Arts Council, There's an awful lot of information on there around how to access sort of local support. And for those that don't know anything about social prescribing, the Social Prescribing Academy is amazing for giving a detailed account of how to access social prescribing for anything art related. Also, the Hub of Hope, which we list many mental health charities and organisations who also use art as a way of therapy and connecting people. So please check that out as well. Conleth.
Well, I'm going to be short and sweet, which I'm sure a lot of you will be quite upset to hear. We've talked about these things before. I've done statistics around this on previous episodes, but just talking around the issue of art, my wife's an artist. We're looking at things like maybe art therapy. I know for myself, whenever it comes to drawing and things like that, I get frustrated. I can't do it. That's it in a nutshell. So I'm trying to think, well, what is my form of art? What kind of things would I actually do just to help with my mental health, things like that? Air guitar is one in particular. I'm very good at that, whatever. But is this a form of art what we're actually doing around here, around this these tables at the minute? It is expressing ourselves, getting things out there, getting our own emotions off our chest as well. But also going back to what Mersey said there earlier, just about choirs, singing, we do know the benefits of that. It's actually quite funny because whenever I'm running along, sometimes in the morning, actually sometimes in the afternoon, whenever I'm coming back from work, there's always a fella cycling along his bike and he's singing his heart out. He's just doing this and it's gorgeous. Nobody goes, oh, you idiot gobshite, like it's a smile. And those are things we're actually doing. So it is maybe looking at different ways to actually think of these things. But what Mersey said just about the issues with choirs, for a lot of us, for a lot of our backgrounds, choirs to me can be a thing of religious. That's whenever I was kind of maybe, I would say, it sounds terrible, being forced to sing. Having to sing in churches and schools, and it was just like, oh bloody hell! Like I would think it was probably maybe about 10 years ago, where it became more these different alternative indie R&B things, rock and roll choirs. Myself and Dan were talking about this earlier, and he says where we are in Merseyside, it seems to be a wash with all these different choirs and things like that. And so it is just finding your niche, looking at those things, actually going down there. And just another thing, just to pick up what Mersey said as well, she did mention about therapy. Just stop looking at me like that, thinking, oh, this is going to be short and sweet. She said about therapy, how she went for therapy and things like this, and it reminds me of an episode I listened to. John Lloyd, the producer, writer, film, for the BBC, does a lot of stuff on radio. He has this program called the Museum of Curiosity. A really good show, and what people actually suggest what they can put into this museum for people to look at. And one of the contributors actually talked about therapy and how therapy helped them so much, how it actually helped them realise a lot of things, when to put themselves in situations and not in situations. What he actually said was these should be on the high street. It should be, you should have maybe, go and show me age, you could have your Woolworths, your Tesco's and your therapy supermarkets and things like that, and actually going in there and look at those things. So I will leave it at that, Ian. Okay. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Short and sweet. Reading the paper this week about Russia, I just think in the UK we've got this massive mental health crisis. They're talking, aren't they, 500 children a day are being referred through for anxiety and anxiety-associated symptoms to mental health services, which just can't cope. So we've got this crisis in mental health. And then I looking and saw the headlines in the paper about what's happening in Ukraine. And there was a report that actually said that they've told people to leave Pokrovsk in Ukraine because of an imminent Russian threat. And the headline actually said, lives packed up into bags as Russians close in on city. And the article starts off and it says, library books are piled in the street, waiting to be removed in a truck. The evacuation train waits half a mile away as people crowd on the platform are waiting to flee. And that just got me thinking about the value, that people there, they're looking, as well as fleeing, what would you, if you've had to flee from your house, had to get out really quickly, what would you grab? I'd be thinking of that. And these people are looking at their
the stock of library books and the importance that they have, and that really resonated with me in terms of, I mean, our house is well over 1,000 books in our house. We wouldn't be able to grab, but the importance of that and importance of art. So it made me think then about the costs. So currently in the UK, it's less than 0.4% of public expenditure is spent on the arts. That's actually far below. Within Europe as a whole, certainly likes of France and Germany, it's something like about 1% of their spending. So, and if you compare that, and I'm not saying we should cut defence spending, it's, we spend like nearly 5% is on defence. That's something like £54 billion. In 2022-23, we had about $4.5 billion and spent on the arts, and that mainly comes through what Conliffe or Dean had said about the Arts Council, which comes through via the National Lottery. And I just think, I went to see a film last night and it said, funded from the British film industry, funded by the National Lottery. And again, actually part of that, 1% of the money that's raised from the National Lottery is for profit, and then 95% is, on the winners. But then it's almost a stealth tax. Who still pays for that? The National Lottery. A lot of it is dependent on poorer people with less income actually paying in terms of then for the arts. So I just think there's an issue then in terms of how that the money we spend in it and how much there should be spent on it. I think something like the arts contribute, they reckon, to about 126 billion gross value to the economy, but it's greater than just monetary costs. And I've got a few people here in terms of, what's the arts good for? And a couple of quotes. So Steve McQueen, who's the artist and filmmaker, he says about it helps creativity and development in science and other fields. Ajoa Andoa, who's an actor, says children who can express themselves, recognise, work with nuance, and who can collaborate, who may then grow into empathic adults and citizens. And in terms of what we've seen in the last, few weeks in terms of from Southport, the shocking riots that have actually taken place. 58 kids aged 11, 12, 14 or so far being prosecuted. Surely we need to be engaging and actually getting them involved in terms of, so they grow up into these empathic children and citizens and become creative artists. If we don't spend that money, then that's what happens in terms of studying arts. It's that people, Gillian Waring talks about being able to communicate effectively within the world. Stephen Hoff, a pianist, says it brings a joy that can last a lifetime, and that engagement with the arts. Shapak Korsand, a comedian, says that art's not a luxury, let people in. And I think that, that's absolutely true, I think, for the arts. But I'll leave it from a last quote to Olivia Lang, who's a favourite author of mine. And she actually says, art belongs to everyone. People are intelligent and receptive, whatever background they come from. And the charge of elitism has been used to defund art at a time of unprecedented need. And she quotes there Jenny Lee, who's a former miner's daughter, who wrote in the 60s about art. And she says, in any civilized community, the arts and associated amenities, serious or comic, light or demanding, must occupy a central need. And Olivia goes on to say, we need to see education more than simply a passport to a high-earning career, but as a process that shapes a person's mind and inner life, their curiosity and capacity for critical thinking. We're heading into dangerous times, and art is crucial if we want to learn how to separate the true from the untrue, how to build community, how to live ethically, and how to find joy and pleasure in the dark.
Well said, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. I always love your segment because you clearly put a lot of time into it, and so much so that I've noticed that you've read back to The Guardian in January to get some of the quotes that you've actually used today. Now that is commitment, mate, and I think we do need to give a shout out for the time and effort that Ian puts into his segment, because it's brilliant. So thanks, mate. However, I was thinking the other week that our segment is kind of a bit like the relay in the Olympics, and you always save the best runner till the last leg. Yeah. So, you know, so now I'm going to disappoint.
The fastest.
Yeah, the fastest till the last. Yeah. So I'm going to start off just have a look on my phone online before with a couple of charities and services in the Liverpool area for art-based sort of therapy and things like that. So there's Solar, it's SOLA, art therapy, which is for adults, children and families, which is based in Toxteth. So go online and you can access that. And then there was another website called the Art Clinic. It was vast amounts of things on there. Check that out as well. But one thing that resonated with me was there was a film on there about men's hearts break, and it's about it's a video around when relationships break down and the fact that men don't really talk, and it's interviews with men who've been voiced by actors, but they've done a video about how men can talk about the feelings when there's a breakdown of the relationship. So that might be worth looking at as well. But then I just wanted to talk about the arts, obviously the theme today, and what art means to me. So I mean, first and foremost, art affects all of the senses, not just what we can see, but what we can touch and smell and hear and taste. And I think hopefully some of that will come across when Martin speaks afterwards about Ron's place and sort of that immersive experience of art, which is so important. And so what art means to me. So for me, art is love. It's a very personal thing, and it's individual and unique only to you. So you will see a piece of art, or you will create a piece of art that is very unique to you in the way you feel about it and how it makes you feel. And does it improve your mental health? Invariably, it will do. Art is beauty, and therefore art is in the eye of the beholder. So, one person might see the work that Banksy's done recently and think, well, the guy's just done a stencil on a satellite dish that's now been pinched. But I think Banksy's art is so popular because he links his work into the immediate environment around him. So 3 monkeys hanging off a railway bridge. So how many people would have passed under that railway bridge every day and never even noticed, that part of their commute or their journey? And now everybody will take in that surrounding and recognise that railway bridge, which, has its own level of beauty. So in essence, sort of, it's not just about the artwork that Banksy presents, it's about the environment around it that actually brings it all together. And I think that's such a clever way of using art, isn't it? So yeah, what else is art to me? So art from our children, okay, and this is where we can get such pleasure from art. So somebody else might look at a picture that your daughter or son's done and think, oh, it's just a scribble, but to you it's extremely special because it's come from a place of love. So I had a picture on my wall when I was working at the university that my daughter had drawn for me, and it's a picture of me with my specs on, and if you look really closely, she's drawn me in my Beatles Abbey Road t-shirt with four little stick men crossing the zebra crossing. And to me that's a really special picture because I know my daughter's taken the time to think about her dad and create something that to her means a lot, and that means a lot to me. So art from your children can mean so much. And boost your way you feel. Art is expression. It gives us a voice. It gives us a platform. And again, I think when Martin speaks, that'll come across within Ron's place. It takes bravery sometimes, but other times, just transferring how we see the world or interpret something can offer therapeutic effect. My father-in-law was diagnosed with bowel cancer about 15, 20 years ago now. And one of the things that he undertook when he was going through obviously a large amount of stress and anxiety with regards to his health was he took up watercolouring. Now this guy had worked in like Crew Works for 40 odd years and never picked up a paintbrush in his life other than to paint the walls. He never painted a watercolour. And he turned his hand to watercolouring and was really, really good at it. And we've still got paintings in our house that he did all that time ago. And he doesn't do it anymore, unfortunately, but I wish he'd take it up because he was really good at it. But again, it gave him some sort of release and that feeling of escapism from his troubles to just paint these watercolours, which turned out to be pretty damn good, I must say. Art is creating, whether it's a picture, a sculpture, a poem, you know, a song, a dance, you know, creating a house. If you're an architect, you know, there's artistry within the drawings that go to build this thing. You know, therefore, creativity is art, and creativity, as we will talk about, is known to help mental health. So if you are, you know, feeling low, then embrace art. Turn this negativity into positivity. Take up photography. Take up painting or drawing like my father-in-law did. You know, write a song, a poem. I've written songs and poems in the past when I've been feeling low or angry, and it does help. Or take a walk. You know, me and Conliffe speak about the Natural Health Service. We have art in the nature all around us, such beauty, you know, in the world we live in, looking at the form of a tree or at the architecture, like I say. So on the way here today, I just was on the train and just saw the Runcorn Bridge in the distance, thinking what a really interesting shape it's got and what interesting, you know, form it takes in architecture that goes to building that type of bridge. The clouds, you know, just looking at the clouds and the art forms that the clouds build. We don't need to be spending money on this stuff to actually get some you know, feelings of tranquility, you know. The birds flying through the sky, okay? All of these are natural exhibits that we can get for free on a daily basis. Just take the time and open your eyes. It's all there, okay? And I think that's about it for me. Have I got anything else on the next page? No. So that's me done. All right.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Dan. It was really nice. And thanks, boys, for your contributions. Really nice segment. Next up, we've got a very short break now, and then we're going to be joined by filmmaker Martin Wallace.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
So we're carrying on with our theme of the arts, and our next guest is Martin Wallace. Martin has directed music videos for bands such as Pulp, Tindersticks, Aphex Twin and Biffy Clyro. As a director of factual television, he's an International Emmy and Royal Television Society Northwest Award winner and BAFTA nominee. Martin is currently producing a feature-length documentary about Ron Gittins, and this is why he has joined us to tell us all about Ron and Ron's place. So welcome to the Man Hug, Martin.
Thanks very much, folks. Nice to be here.
So many people will not know the story of Ron Gittins yet. So what can you tell us?
Ron died age 79 in 2019. So he'd been kicking around for a long time, Ron, and a lot of people knew him. But what people didn't know was what he was up to in his house. Yeah. And he'd basically spent about 33 years transforming a rented property that started out quite scabby, really, in an area that people were not interested in living in. And he turned it into this amazing kind of fantasy palace of his, where he decorated walls, ceiling, floors, built these amazing concrete fireplaces in the shapes of animals' heads. And he just brought all his passions to life in this place. And most people, even who knew him, because he was a bit of a character, and I can tell you about that, didn't quite know what he was up to behind closed doors. So when this was discovered, it was a real eye-opener for people. For his family, it was difficult because they didn't know what he was up to. They thought they were just going to be clearing out what they assumed would be relatively meagre possessions. So he was 79. He had an older sister who was early 80s and a younger sister, and they went round and they basically thought, you know, we'll get Ron's gear into a suitcase, his rent will run out, and we'll concentrate on mourning our brother, and that'll be the end of it. But they walked in and then discovered this amazing place that you'd really need to go online, search Ron's place, and you'll see it for yourself.
Yeah, it is an absolutely incredible thing to see. I mean, we can't really do it any justice by talking about it, can we? But they've called it different rooms now, haven't they? So there's like a lion room and there's a minotaur room, and just tell us a little bit about that. It's
a double-fronted Victorian semi, so it's quite a big house. Each of the rooms is about sort of 15 by 20 feet. And the high ceilings with sort of, great big doors and big foot-tall skirting boards. So it's quite a grand old place. But as I say, it had been down at heel. But he's changed it into a kind of themed situation. So his main living rooms we call the lion room, because there's a 2-metre tall lion's head fireplace that roars. And that looks really, it doesn't just look like a lion. It's a really striking capturing of a real animal but in concrete. He's made it out of concrete. You know, it's very expressive. But he used to cook his, you know, homemade pancakes in the lion's mouth. And all those walls are done like, they're done like frescoes from the old ancient Roman places that were destroyed in the eruption of Vesuvius. So Herculaneum, Pompeii and Stabia, those three cities have got all these old ancient villas, and Ron's based these murals on different murals from them villas. There's another room that's done almost like in a Greek theme, so there's sort of Greek thinkers and writers all around the top frieze, sort of like paintings of, they look like plaster busts. He's done them in black and white. Then in that room he's got a giant Minotaur's head that again was a fireplace. And he used that as a studio. Then there's another room that's done in sort of Regency style, where he's painted portraits on walls with the frames, so it looks a bit like a kind of haunted house where the eyes will be following you around. Ceilings are painted, floors are painted, you know. So and the thing is, even if this was a video podcast and we showed the pictures, I can tell you, having seen these places all over the world in other films that I've made, that there's nothing like going into it. You know, pictures just can't do it justice, because we are kind of human physical beings, and when you go into a space you can just feel another level of energy coming off it that's different to pictures can give you.
That's it, isn't it? For what you've learnt about you know, the history of Ron now, when you look at especially the artwork in there, you'd think that this is someone that's maybe studied art, or maybe they have got like a history background or anything like this. What types of things do we know about Ron from his earlier life?
Well, he was a very studious fella. I mean, to begin with, I never met Ron, but I've interviewed about 30 people who did know Ron at different phases of life. And I've gone through, Ron left behind a kind of giant cardboard box full of scraps of paper from the whole of his life. So for the best part of 4 years, I went through all of that, put it into a kind of order that gave a bit of a picture that was followable. So I've learned a lot about the man, but still it's speculation from my point. But he was a really studious young lad. Like, for example, I was reading his report from when he was age 11 the other day. And in them days, you know, born in 1939, school through the sort of war years and beyond, they used to rate you like out of the class. And he was second out of 36. So clearly he was a bright lad. And he got O levels and stuff, which back then was another big deal, really. Not everybody would be doing that. He loved making little soldiers. This is info from his sister, and he was always passionate about history, and he's even got some early books where some of the things he ends up doing 70 years later, he's into them from the word go, ancient history. That generation of people who grew up through the war and stuff, they were naturally led towards thinking about the great empires, because Britain was coming out of that phase of being one itself, coming into a war where it's good against evil. So all of these sort of big ideas about history and quite almost like boys' own ideas about it, Ron was into that from early on, really. But he did have some training. He went to Laird School of Art, did a course there. He was an avid reader, and he would always be reading about art and history. And later in life, in his mid-40s, when he was deemed as an unemployed person in the 80s, he ended up doing some A-levels. He didn't finish them, but he began them. Again, art, drama and English. So he wasn't this sort of... Often when people talk about this term outsider art, which sometimes it gets applied to what Ron's done, you get this idea of someone who's kind of grown up in a cupboard and doesn't really know about anything. But Ron was, you know, a really knowledgeable fella, but a lot of his teaching that he'd been through, he was self-taught a lot of the time, really.
Wow, amazing. In terms of his personal life as well, then, so what types of things do we know about Ron? You know, one of the things I did hear was about maybe sort of like murals to a woman on a wall. Maybe it was an ex or someone that he was in love with.
At this part, I've got to say, he's not been very lucky in love, Ron, from what I can see. You know, he didn't have a long-term partner, and that's what makes him, as a filmmaker, trying to construct a picture of him. In a way, that's what makes this possible. Is he a bit of an enigma and a bit of a mystery, because he doesn't have this continuous sort of set of friends or a partner or people who you can just go to one person, they can give you a pretty accurate, definitive version of him. But yeah, I've met people who he was a very charming, sort of old school kind of person. He was quite sort of chivalrous and all that kind of stuff. But I think sometimes his ability to read the room wasn't always great. So sometimes he got interested in people who weren't interested in him. But he saw that as, part of the wondrous challenge of love kind of thing, it would seem. So, yeah, that picture on the wall, in the Regency room, there are 3 portraits of people. And the central portrait is the portrait of a woman who looks like Nelson's girlfriend. But actually, and this is often what Ron would do, he'd see you in a pub, for example, and people have told me this, that this guy who he knew called Peter said, he saw me in a pub and he said, you look like Harold Hardradason, the Viking who invaded in whatever it was, 800 AD. Can I paint you as a Viking? So there's an amazing portrait of Peter from, West Kirby or whatever he's from, as this Viking, and that's what he'd do. He'd attach you as a person to an historic figure. Wow. So this picture of a woman in the middle, it's actually somebody who we believe to be a traveller woman called Josie, who he was fond of. Right. But he's painted her in an historic way that sort of matches with the other portraits. And that seems to be a common feature of him. He liked to, in some ways, I think he liked to paint people and real people, but he wanted that connection to his passion, which was the history. And I think he quite liked showing off because he was pretty clever about that history. So I'm pretty sure I get the vibe that he liked to be able to tell you all about such and such a person because he knew about it.
Wow. I think that for me, the biggest sort of thing that I've took from learning about Ron and Ron's place is that I've worked in mental health for like 20 years, and often people will kind of maybe get ostracised in the community. They'll end up being labelled with a nickname, or they'll be shunned, or they'll be a character. And a lot of the time people don't know about their personal life and their history. And I always kind of got that sense with Ron as well, in terms of, being a character, maybe walking around Birkenhead dressed as Napoleon or whatever it was that he did. How much do you think, people learning about his artwork and his history and his life will change people's views? And
I hope it will do a lot because, like you say, he was well known, and I'm sure, based on what I've learned from interviewing people, there seem to be 2 categories of people really in the world. There were those that sort of got Ron and understood him, and then he would have conversations with them and they'd learn a lot about him. And then there were other people who were a bit like, oh, I don't quite know what to make of that fella, I'm going to give him a wide berth. And as I've gone around interviewing people, for example, I've said to them often towards the end of the interview, do you think Ron had a mental health problem? And it's about 50-50. Some people go, are you kidding me? Of course he didn't have a mental health problem. And other people say, oh no, obviously he did. So, but I find that really fascinating that, A, people are more than their mental health problems if they've technically got one. But B, we're all changing and shifting, and so that there's no single answer to that question. In terms of, I think some people enjoyed Ron's creative, lively mind and saw that as a positive. Many people, I think, were slightly envious of Ron because he dressed up and did what he wanted to do, whereas we all think, oh God, I really wish I could do that, but everyone might think X, Y, and Z, or you may not even articulate that thought. You just don't quite feel yourself because you're too afraid to be yourself. Ron didn't really have that problem mostly. Don't get me wrong, it's easy to suggest that he was just some kind of happy guy all the time. He wasn't. I think he was lonely at times, and I think there would be times when his struggles with his mental health would have been difficult for him. But by and large, I think he harnessed what would have been labelled as a condition in some circumstances and rode it to his advantage. He writes... Sorry, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, do you think he combated his loneliness by painting the people that he met and the relationships that he struck up with those people, painting those on his walls? And do you think that he throughout the 30 years he lived there, he may have painted over like different people that he'd come across over the years?
We know he's done that once because he took some photos of these paper mache figures of ancient Romans and Egyptians that he was making to use as models to paint another picture. And in the background of his own little... I got a camera developed, you know, an old disposable camera. So some of his photos of his house as he was living in it are incidentally showing us stuff, but even though the subject of them, there was these paper mache things. So that Josie portrait, for example, it used to be a painting of his dad and his dad's mate when they were seamen, which I'd found the photo of that. So that's, I was thinking, oh my God, that's the picture that's on the wall. And then suddenly, you know, you think, well, that's not there anymore. So at some stage, he decided, sorry, Dad, but I like this.
Like Josie Moore.
Girl better than you, yeah. And then in terms of combating his loneliness, I couldn't really say. I get the impression that his energy, I don't think Ron dwelt on his loneliness. I think, I imagine, and it's speculation, he felt it, but I don't think he labelled it at that. I didn't think I get the impression he just carried on and did what he wanted to do. We're talking about a man who, you know, there were times when he thought he was a secret agent and went on missions and wrote to, you know, prime ministers about them and chief of police about them. So quite deluded behaviour in a rational way. And there were other times where, you know, that same energy he patented the chemical substrate for attaching colours to canvases, you know. So, and he kept that patent going when he was living on disability allowance and could hardly, you know, he was living really frugally. So these energies, I think, it's difficult to say, but I don't ever really get the feeling that he ever said to himself he was lonely. I think he'd write a song about how he was feeling, if you know what I mean. It seemed to come out always in very positive ways, his feelings, I suspect.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And once people discovered what was in Ron's house, how did the art world take it? You know, did they think that this was a sort of a big discovery, or, as you say, sort of like this found art of?
Obviously, a lot of things happened over an extended period of time, and it was a COVID time. But when I saw it midnight on the 30th of January 2019. My wife showed me the Echo online, and I basically did some sleuthing, found out who these people were, who they were being spoken about, found emails for them, and emailed them that night and said, I'm coming tomorrow. Because I'd made a series for Channel 4 years ago about these places all over the world. So I knew what this was. It's Ron's place. Not that Ron called it that, but that's what it is. But actually, it's a phenomenon that bubbles up reasonably frequently in the past, less so nowadays. Nothing like that in the UK. So I knew how important it was internationally and how rare it was specifically within the UK. But by the time we'd raised about $8,000 in February to sort of keep paying the rent and just get some thinking time, I had COVID by March 2050, by the 15th of March. Didn't know what it was then. I just felt lousy and was like talking nonsense to the kids. But, you know, suddenly that threw a big spanner in the works. So we were earning money through different means to keep paying the rent and keep paying the council tax. But we didn't really get much traction in those years. Yeah. Something similar, not as good as Ron's place, I have to say, was found down in London about the same time. Wow. They had loads of money. They had like the Prime Minister, the Mayor's of London's office was giving them money. The head of the Tate went there, and it sounds like a bit of a kind of moany sour grape story, but that split between where the power is to recognise and uplift culture, it just wasn't round here. And we did, sadly, it has to be said, write to the local galleries and that, but they, you know, for whatever reason, COVID might be the best excuse, but they weren't gagging to help us because in some ways they couldn't really, you know, it's hard for the official sort of kingdoms of art to quite know what to make of it because actually a lot of their power and strength comes from saying, well, you lot are amateurs, we're the professionals, and we only deal with professional you know, artists. And it's a bit like Emperor's New Clothes in a way. And now that we've got, you know, 4 years later, Historic England Grade 2 listed status, life becomes a bit easier because everyone's going, do you need any help? And it's like, oh, are you?
Where,
yeah.
Yeah. So there was obviously the big campaign, the Saving Ron's Place, which is, people power really, wasn't it?
Definitely
people
was.
like yourself and others who just, campaigned and did it. And then sort of like the last day it was saved.
That end bit is a bit of a kind of magical fairy tale bit. But the people power thing you mentioned is easy to forget. So I don't mean even the people who amongst the volunteers who were doing it. I'm talking about the people who responded to this thing that was out there, particularly local people in Birkenhead who saw it and thought, you could feel that there was a sense of pride, like, look what one of ours has done. And I thought that was really important. And there were a lot of people given relatively small amounts of money to the grand scheme of things, but big amounts of money to them who just wanted it to carry on because it represented more than Ron's Place. It represented a little bit of individuality that in modern life often gets sort of rubbed out and erased. But
do you think with that as well, there was maybe I don't want to say the word guilt, but maybe, people wished they'd got to know him while he was alive and got to...
I think more people said positive things about him when he was no longer there to trouble them, and when they could see the attention and the excitement that was focused on what he'd built. But I don't think it would be guilt as much. It didn't really... People were quite, in my experience, quite honest about what they thought about him, even though sometimes it would be a bit, if you like, incriminating towards them, because you just think, well, why did you have that attitude to him? And then going back to what actually happened to save the day, we had been trying to raise money to keep paying the bills. We'd been trying to find a partner like a housing association who would take on the 3 flats above Ron's and use that rental income to cut us some slack below, and then we would do stuff with that place. But we just couldn't make it happen because the landlord wanted 465 grand for the building. It's a big building, but at the time, that wasn't unreasonable. Since then, interest rates have gone up and what have you. But so he wasn't trying to penalise us because he knew we couldn't find anywhere else with a lion fireplace kind of thing. But he was kind of like a businessman, and he knew that once he'd got rid of Ron, he was going to do it up and it was going to become luxury apartments. So he wasn't going to part with it for a song. And he'd been great letting us rent it for 4 years. So, but anyway, he'd given everybody else their notice and moved them out. And then he gave us our notice. We were the last people in. He gave us our notice on the 31st of January. So we basically had Feb. We tried to raise a few bob, and we had maybe 10% of that amount of money. And so there were, a lot of tears and a lot of sadness, and it was like over. Definitely over. And those tears and the sadness was Ron's niece, Jan, who's the daughter of Ron's sister, Pat, and Jan's partner, Chris. They were the people who had sort of instigated that Echo article that I had seen. They're artist photographers who live down in Portsmouth. So it was them who first realised that it was almost like worth trying to do something. But it was, he's not my uncle. So, and I felt I had done everything I could and I couldn't really do any more. So if it was going to go, we'd done our best. And I'd seen that happen in other places around the world as well. So anyway, we've been through all that rigmarole of that, and it was, unpleasant. But as I say, personally, I thought, well, do you know what? No one could say you should have done this or you should have done that. We tried everything. And then it was on an auction site that was going to close at 12. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, some woman sent an email, said, I think I can help you. And I was thinking, oh, God, here we go. Someone who's going to say, have you thought about asking Yoko Ono? Or have you thought about, Stephen Gerrard? Or why Jarvis has got loads of money? Just coming out with something that they want to be helpful. But it's like, we have thought about some of this stuff. We had basically tried to get through to Paul McCartney, and we had tried to get through to, but, these people are getting harangues left, right and centre for money, aren't they? So anyway, so I spoke to this woman on the phone, and she said, I'm thinking about lending you the money. So I was like, okay. And she was like, so we started talking, and we just got on really well. And she said, look, I'm really busy at the moment, though. I'm on a train going into London. And by the end of this 15-minute conversation, she said, I'll give you the money, but you're going to have to bid in the auction because I just can't do that now because I'm going to work, sort of thing. So I put the phone down, and my wife was looking at me thinking, what is happening here? Something's going on, because she could hear what was going on in the background. So luckily enough, because it was online, you could basically put your credit card down, and there was a limit to what the mechanical system of the internet could take off your credit card. So normally in an auction, you'd have to put 10% down, which, you know, in this case could have been like 46.5 grand. But because of this online thing, you only had to pay 10 grand for the deposit and 1,500 quid for the auctioneer's fees. So I had a credit card big enough to take that hit. But suddenly when everyone had gone and I was putting my card details in, I was thinking, is this one of them things where it's like, you know, can you just let this money rest in your account? It's like, I'm going to then be bidding and potentially winning Ron's place with no money to back it up and trying to dial this woman back. But anyway, I did trust her because she told me a couple of things that made me understand why she wanted to do it. And she was a social historian, married to somebody who'd made a lot of money in computer technology. She and he had saved a house in Cambridgeshire that was similar but different to Ron's. It was a fella who used to work for a high quality painting and decorating thing called David Parr House in Cambridgeshire. And he used to go home in his little 2 up, 2 down and practice all the stuff that he was getting paid to do at big stately homes. So it's a 2 up, 2 down in Cambridgeshire that's got hand-painted wallpaper from the 1870s. So she'd done that, and she'd bought that because she was frustrated with the lack of support from the National Trust and that kind of thing. So, yeah, basically she understood our pain. But the weird thing was, Ron's place by this point had been in The Guardian 3 times. It had been on BBC, you know, national. It'd been on News at 10. You know, the bongs and a man in Birkenhead today. And I was thinking at this point, if there's anybody in this country who can help us, they must know about it by now. So if we can't get anyone to help us, it's because there isn't anyone. But then she'd taken yesterday's paper with her on that train the morning and just decided to read yesterday's paper and saw the article. So it was an absolute fairy tale, in inverted commas, ending. But of course, she said to me that day, she said, you know, this isn't the end of anything, this is the beginning of it. Yeah. And so, you know, that's what it's been like. She saved it, but actually then that's when the hard work begins, because you've then got to make it available to people, and you've got to sort the conservation stuff out so it doesn't all fall apart by the end of next year, kind of thing.
So what amazing thing, it's been saved, and then comes the next phase then, doesn't it, you know, of having patrons and people involved, and, you know, how do you then keep that legacy and promote it to the public as well? But just off looking on the website, you can see you've got quite a few big well-known patrons, Jarvis Cocker and Wayne Hemingway as well, and I think the quote that's on there from Wayne is just incredible. Should I read it out? Please. So Wayne Hemingway was the patron. He said, Ron clearly didn't give a monkeys about fame or fortune. He didn't need that. He had his artistic mind and gave him purpose, and this purpose seemed to be to make his modest rented flat into an immersive, self-produced art gallery for an audience of one. I thought that's absolutely incredible, isn't it? Sums it totally up.
Yeah, no, I think Ron did it for his own pleasure. You know, it's almost like if it wasn't that he didn't want anyone to see it, I don't think. At times he would, if he felt like you would get it and he trusted you, he would let you come see it. But actually the pleasure was in the dreaming of doing it and the process of doing it, and then the satisfaction of doing it, but it wasn't a means to an end sort of thing. It was the doing of it, I can tell, was important to him, you know, because he would document that process sometimes, and he'd be up all hours, be painting by candlelight because he had no lecky, and, you know, he loved it. It was sort of part of him, and that's why I say, in a way, the photos can't really do that. But whether you're religious or not, you go to a church or something like that, you're on holiday, you go into a church, cathedral or something, and that space, I'm not talking about some kind of cosmic sanctity. I just mean you can tell how many hours have gone into building this, and that someone's bothered to carve that little thing there, and that it's got, you know, an atmosphere to it. And it's the same in Ron's place. You can't ignore without having any expert sort of opinion about it. You just can't ignore the amount of love and energy that's gone into the space. And I think that's what's interesting about these spaces, is because everybody's got their home. Some people's homes are sort of not necessarily ideal for them, but everyone's got their space, their little corner of the world. And everyone likes to personalise their little corner a little bit, at least. And everyone knows that feeling of being home. And when you go into Ron's, it sort of oscillates between the wild and wonderful things he's done, but your intuitive understanding that that's kind of what we're meant to do, what we're built to do, is express ourselves and have a kind of voice and an outlet.
That's it. I remember reading as well, Jarvis Cocker was saying, you know, we've all got like things that once left behind we'll be able to paint a picture of us, whether it's receipts or tickets to things or photographs and things like that as well. And what sort of things did you find from Ron's life other than the art? What things were in his big mound of bags?
Like kind of, you know, the cards that he used to get to pay the lecky, like little cards with a silver strip on the back. He kept them, you know. So he wasn't a full-on hoarder in terms of hoarding as a condition, because I've worked with hoarders and took hoarders into Ron's and let them explore and see what they thought of it, and we used that as a basis for them in their group. I think a lot of times Ron would keep things because he thought that they were going to be useful materials for him. So he often used, for example, he used to drink Lipton's ready-made tea. And we know this because there are lots of tins of plastic Lipton's ready-made tea. But he'd use them as the limb substructures in the paper mache things that he made. He'd keep loads of Whittle globes because he'd use them to make the paper mache, and so on and so forth. He's got lots of postcards and things that he liked. And, you know, there's plenty of tat that he kept, like his mum. He was very close to his mum. Sometimes his mum would stay with him. So he's got plenty of old false teeth kicking around, like most people who can remember back to going to the nana's house or what have you. You'd open the drawer and, whoa, what's that in there? So he's got all kinds of stuff. But over the years, obviously his kind of creative powers, as he got older and older, did diminish. So there did seem to be a bit of a gap opening up between his big ideas, his gathering of materials, and his ability to actually transform them into anything. So I didn't go in until the last day of January, but it was sort of October that he died. And initially, some of the rooms, they were quite kind of cluttered and verging on the unsanitary, because there were like leaks and, you know, you weren't sure what kind of rats and vermin might have been kicking around beneath piles of this, that and the other. So he did, in a way, neglect himself as he got older because his health deteriorated. He was a proud guy and he didn't want to go to hospital.
So in terms of like other people that have been involved as well, so you did the programme with Jarvis Cocker, didn't you, with Journeys into the Outside on Channel 4. What was it when he first went in that, you know, made him so passionate about it? Because I know he did a lot in terms of the fundraising as well, didn't he?
I mean, I just, because we've known each other for whatever it is, 35 years or something, I just told him, look, there's this place, we found it, it's really good, it's the best thing. And he just immediately knew what it was, sent him a few photos. So he said, yeah, I'll help you however I can. And I think it was, because of COVID, it was like maybe the November of 21 before he managed to get up here and see it for one reason or another. It might have been 20, I can't remember. But yeah, no, he just really knew that it was special and enjoyed being there. And he's always got his own little kind of take on things as well, you know, in terms of how he sees it. And it did chime with the time when Jarvis was writing a book about all the crap he'd kept in his loft. Yeah. So it sort of was good timing for that, really. I think, yeah. So he really enjoyed it. And it's obviously it makes life a bit easier to have someone like that on your side. But it doesn't make you bulletproof. You know, he came up and he did the show in the Playhouse that we did, and, you know, he just sent all the proceeds to that. But he's, you know, he knows its importance and its value, but he's obviously got his own life to live, and he can't sort of, no matter how great you think Ron's place is, you can't sort of drop everything and suddenly move to Birkenhead, you know.
Yeah. So what's the future looking like for Ron's place then? What are the plans for it?
the vision for Ron's Place has actually been quite clear, I think, from very, very early on. We knew that, particularly because of the things I'd seen that had been success stories in other parts of the world, that you need to, instead of just saying, isn't this amazing, give us some money for it, you need to say, why is it useful now? What can it do for us now? And I could see that it would really inspire people towards creativity, and that particularly because Birkenhead, even though there are very wealthy pockets in Oxton, etc., there's a lot of deprivation in Birkenhead, and there's a lot of people who could do with a boost. And visiting Ron's Place and then being involved in a programme of creative activity, I personally strongly believe can be empowering for people. And so we want to use Ron's Place in that way, really, so that ordinary people can be exposed to something that makes sense to them creatively and kind of inspires them, that makes them realise, hang on, Ron didn't really have any rules. Let me have a little try it, see where that leads. At the same time, there are more conventional, you could do artist residencies there and blah, 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 but I'm less interested personally in parachuting people in from elsewhere who take a little kind of rub of it and then move on to the next thing somewhere else. I think that at the level of, for example, social prescribing, it's a really powerful resource, and that's my big thing. Is I actually think it meets a need and provides a really kind of innovative, unique resource. You can't make a Ron's Place. You couldn't say, well, let's put one in Dudley and let's build one ourselves and then everyone can come and be inspired. It doesn't work like that. We're lucky we've struck gold here, so let's use it.
It's amazing. Come on, if you have a question.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this question. It's not really quite. It's just getting your opinion on it. I'm name dropping here. My dad, he went to school with Seamus Heaney, and Heaney's always been integral in our family, growing up. And my dad, he used to be the manager of Woolworths. Remember whenever he was up in Belfast, up there, I was only a bairn then at the time, but Heaney used to come in and he'd be on the bones of his arse, no money. And he also had a family as well. So I'm also thinking about the selfishness or stubbornness of actually sticking to this, whatever. But he'd be coming in, my dad would actually give him food out of Woolworths, whatever, broken crockery, things like that, to help him keep him going, things like that. And obviously he made it. And it's around this thing about, not around fame, whatever, but it's this kind of, to be this good or to actually have this commitment does actually take a certain amount of selfishness, stubbornness and things like this. And I'm just thinking, can you see that as well? Maybe within Ron or...
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. That's what it almost goes back to, that loneliness point. It's like a choice that he makes. Nothing's more important than this. Yeah. And people often say of Ron, more than one person said to me about, you couldn't sort of cross Ron or you couldn't win with Ron. He was very, if he felt he was right about something, and he wouldn't just be because of his gut instinct, it'd be because he knew X, Y and Z about it, he wouldn't budge. So that obviously then made him quite inflexible, which then makes friendships difficult sometimes, because he wasn't that prepared to budge if he thought he was right about something. So I think he definitely was selfish when he was living at home with his mum and dad. Apparently, at times, he would be a real nightmare in his 30s, and he's kind of like building Roman walls in the back garden. He worked as an odd jobman and a gardener, but again, people would sack him after a while because he wouldn't do what they'd asked him to do. He'd do what he thought they wanted or should have. So he was quite,
But could that have a knock-on effect to his work, for the fact that he's done this huge gallery in a room and he didn't want people to criticise it, so it's just like, this is just me? I know it's speculation.
Yeah, no, but I agree. He wouldn't have countenanced anybody criticising it. But I imagine the processes of how he engaged with people would have pre-filtered those people out. Yeah. He would have been looking for people who were open. And I think anyone who's open, who walks into that place, and this is where some people just don't get it, but it's not like I would say, no one could ever paint that painting he's painted of Admiral Nelson. Of course they could. Loads of people can do it. But it's the bigger question: who's going to spend 33 years covering every single? It's the cumulative project that carries the power and the weight and the implicit sacrifices that have gone along with that. Talking about a man who didn't live with running water for years because he was in a dispute with the water board because his first tenancy included rates and water. You know, so he was a sort of stickler for certain things, Ron, and that inflexibility maybe complicated his relationships with people, but it also gave him the resilience to keep going. And he had a lot of rejections in his life. You know, he'd be writing to the palace asking, could he see the royal collection? Could he paint Prince Charles and all this lot? And he'd be getting knocked back left, right and centre, but didn't stop him. He didn't think, do you know what, actually, I think I'm just going to take my disability allowance and just start betting on the horses and leave it at that kind of thing. He believed in himself, and he kept believing in himself to the very, very end. And I there's some sad things about Ron. You know, he died in the hall, and that in itself, his house was a bit sort of, unpleasant at that stage in many ways, particularly for his sisters who found that upsetting. But people who met Ron in the week before he died, I read into the way he was with them that he was enjoying them seeing what he created, and he wanted to die on his own terms. And I think there was a lot of dignity in that. Doesn't mean that it's right for everyone, but I do have a lot of respect for Ron's commitment to the choices that he made.
That's it. It's that commitment. I am putting them up there with Heaney, you know, who was also a lover of classical studies, you know, the arts and things like that. So, yeah, power and respect, like, you know. So
being a filmmaker, I suppose, has been a bit more like being a detective for this than really.
That's what this film is a little bit like on purpose. You know, I don't wander around with a sort of, you know, fedora on and my collar up or anything, but it has been a case of, when I first went to Ron's place, I was not interested in making a film. I was interested in helping them, full stop. And then as we began to do a couple of talks, public talks to raise a few bob and awareness, people started coming up to me and saying, after the talk, they'd say, oh, I knew Ron, and then they'd tell me 3 things, and then someone else would come up and tell me 3 different, almost contradictory things, and someone else would come, and I was thinking, how can this be the same person? And then I thought, actually, that'd be quite interesting to in the same way as he loved ancient history and that idea of archaeology and piecing all the broken bits together, I just thought, what about if I piece all these broken bits together? What am I going to discover? You know, and it's a conceit, because I'm not going to, there's no truth about Ron, is there? You know, he's a living, breathing guy for nearly 80 years. He's got lots of truths about him, but I do want to try and bring him to life, because nobody, not even his sisters who he was close to, really kind of knew him in all his facets, because there was a lot of different things to his life.
To us looking in, we would obviously think, oh, what a privilege it must be for you to, you know, discover all of this about this man's life. But has it took over your life? Are you dreaming about Ron? And
I don't know about dreaming about him, because I don't really remember my dreams that much, so it could be true. But I'll tell you this, I live in an Edwardian double-fronted semi that's number 8. So there were times when I was going home into the same basic house with the same room plan, and I was thinking, you know, is this some kind of weird kind of looping back of history? Is this how I'm destined to end? Because I am a bit like that, whereby when I'm making a film, it's like a commitment that you make that you have to see through come what may. Yeah. And it, you know, so but it's definitely been a privilege, because because that thing of speaking to people and sort of, I'm 56 years of age now as well, so there's a sense of, when you go to Ron's place, there's a sense of he's everywhere, but he's also absent, obviously, because he's dead. But I think that's a power of the space. But certainly my looking at that space, it reminds me of all the crap that I own and what will happen to that when I'm gone, and, you know, all the people I've loved, family and what have you, who aren't here anymore, and I've still got bits and pieces of them. So I think there's something powerful in any process of looking back at a life. It gives you that sort of more long-term view, really, and even, I don't know, you're looking at his his school report from when he's a kid. You know, he's been a little kid, this man. He wasn't always wandering around in Napoleon outfits and stuff. He was a little child, and then he was pushing his mum round in a wheelchair later in his own life, and now he's not here. So I think hopefully the documentary, it isn't in a way just about Ron. It's about what constitutes a person and how much do we know of one another and how much of what we take an interest in our lives really matters in the end. Yeah. So it's got that sort of element to it which is slightly kind of cuts through the Ron story into being something a bit more contemplative.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I think as well, you know, there will be people that watch it who might have known Ron from passing and things, but just did not know about this, you know, all these amazing things about this man. And I think it's going to open a lot of people's minds, really, about the people that we pass on every day, you know, who we're very quick to judge and you know, we don't know their full history and their full story, and something so beautiful as this. So thanks so much for what you're doing, you know, and all of you amazing guys who've just fought to keep it open. I think it's such a special thing, you know? Yeah,
well, hopefully, I mean, I couldn't give you the date, and I'm less involved in it now than I used to be, but hopefully the plan is that it will be open to the public at relatively low cost for like a guided tour, as well as the sort of social prescribing end of it. So there's going to be opportunities for people to experience it for themselves and see what they make of it, really. As I say, that's that power of it, is it's a very stimulating place, and it's got the potential to drive lots of different kinds of projects. But until the conservation is done, if sort of bunches of people are going in there all the time, it's basically just going to be falling apart. So it has to be stabilised before that can happen.
Amazing. So people just keep up to date on social media and their website?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it. And there are some sort of plans afoot to make some of the, in inverted commas, archive that I've put together over the last few years, to make that publicly available so people can explore Ron's story for themselves. Because it is his story. His house is great, but his story sort of really brings that to life as well.
Definitely. I think that's the most important thing, isn't it? Thanks so much for coming on. You know, I'm really excited for your documentary, and I'm excited to come and have a look as well and things. But anyone who is listening, you can go onto the Ron's Place website, and there's a bit of a virtual tour on there as well, isn't it? People can have a look at that, and you'll see some videos on there. There's the first time Jarvis went into the house, and he was very shocked by the baby with the six-pack, and all of these videos that are on there as well. So do check it out. But we're really excited for your documentary, and I'm sure we'll be there for the premiere of it if we're given some tickets.
Understood. Yeah. No, thanks very much for asking me. It's been nice to talk about it with you. So yeah, good luck with this as well. This is great.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Martin. Cheers.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Okay, so I'm now joined by Tim Taylor, who is the musical director for Liverpool Indie Choir. So thanks very much for joining us, Tim.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me, Dean.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you. So we have on the Man Hug in previous episodes spoke about the power of music. You know, we know how amazing music is for your well-being, and as myself and the other hosts always preach, you know, it has amazing effects on the body and memory and emotions, and you know, it's a big thing. But we've never really spoke about the collectiveness of music, so singing as part of a choir, for example.
Yeah.
So before we get into all of that, just tell us a little bit about the Liverpool Indie Choir, who they are and what you do.
So Liverpool Indie Choir then was started in June 29, and it was a thing for me where I just wanted to do something a little bit different where choir was concerned. And then we were going really, really well until lockdown in April 20, and got back together in July, August 21. I think was Freedom Day around that time, wasn't it? So basically what it was about doing a choiry thing, but not doing usual choir songs, if that makes sense. Yeah. So we are choiry, but not choiry in the sense of what traditional pop choirs tend to sing. So we just tend to sing different types of songs. And what I've found is that it's attracted a whole different audience of people to come and join and be a part of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Why is it that you think, or from people you've spoken to, why is it that why do people do it? What is it that they get most out of being part of a collective singing group?
Yeah, I think there's lots of things. I don't think it's any one thing. I think there's, even for myself, there's more than one thing. For sure, there is the collective of making music as a group, especially a large group, because we are a large group. But there's also the sense of community, friendships. And I've always said that there's, something very, very tribal about singing together with a group of people. Like, you can't really sort of put your finger on, if you like, but what you can put your finger on is at the end of a rehearsal is how happy everybody looks and how well everybody feels.
That's amazing, isn't it? For someone like yourself who, facilitates these sessions, to see people maybe who've come in and maybe had a bad day at work or what have you, and then they're all leaving happy. But on top of what you just said there, how many people do you see go off and do other things together because they form, friendships and these types of things?
Our choir is very, very, very social. Yeah. So there's lots of activities. They go on nights out. We have Sunday lunch at local venues. Lots of gigs. There's all different types of things that people get up to. So some I'm involved with, some not.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And again, that's something we touch on an awful lot. That's really important for men's mental health is a lot of these groups that people see and advertise, until you go there, you don't reap all of the other benefits, do you?
No.
Forming these friendships and the additional activities that go on afterwards as well. So why do you think being in a choir is good for our mental health and well-being? And from your own personal, what would you say are the big things for that?
From a personal point of view, I would be 100% behind the theory that singing really does make you feel better. Yeah. It's like the exercise thing where, once you've gone through the pain barrier, you feel that, you get that endorphin rush sort of thing. And then so singing is very, very similar to that. You do get an endorphin rush. And I think also, because we're a very, very performance-based choir, so we do a lot of gigs. We get asked to do a lot of gigs, and we perform a lot. Yeah. So I think there's that sort of pushing yourself as well, where, a small group may not want to do a performance, but with a larger group, you think, well, let's do it because there's lots of people here, what can possibly go wrong and that sort of thing. I like to perform as part of a group. So I think I've just carried that forward, and I think it just gives people that sort of, I know what the feelings are like about, like the sort of beforehand, that like a bit of anxiety or what will happen today and all that, but the feeling of I'm going to do it anyway, get on with it, and then afterwards you go, well, I'm really glad I did that, and that collective feeling of singing together and performing together particularly is amazing.
Like a sense of achievement, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing. I had a friend who used to be in the NHS choir, and I remember them saying it was the most daunting experience the first time that they performed, but like they couldn't sleep that night. They were that overcome with so much excitement that they'd achieved it, which is an amazing thing. What would you recommend? If, say for example, someone was listening and they thought, I'd like to give this a go. I'm just really nervous, in actually turning up or giving it a try. What if someone thinks that I sound bad or what have you? These are the types of typical thoughts that people might have.
Of course.
They?
Yeah. What I would say is you absolutely must give it a try, even if it's not our group. Join a choir, join any choir. There is always going to be that anxiety when you go to join and that nervousness, but particularly with our group, it's super, super friendly. It's all about the enjoyment of singing. It's very, very relaxed atmosphere. We have fun during rehearsals. So it's just all about that making music together, really. Yeah. I'm quite lucky in the respect that I have been on the other side. So even though I'm a choir leader, I've also been choir member in lots of different environments. And I know exactly what it feels like to join a group and have that my heart is in my mouth right now type feeling.
Yeah. So do you see that as well, with people that come and maybe are a bit nervous, their confidence growing week in and week out after performing?
Definitely, yeah.
That's incredible, isn't it? That it has the power to do that, to enhance people's confidence. I suppose that's sort of a big selling point, isn't it, really? Because some people may have never performed in front of anyone before, So that feeling of confidence afterwards, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, so how do people find out about your own choir? What's the advice that you give for anyone that might want to get involved?
So we've got a big social media presence, so Facebook and Instagram, both Liverpool Indie Choir. We have a website which has also got lots of information on it. That's liverpoolindychoir.co.uk. So my WhatsApp number's on there, my email address is on there, so people can drop me a message however they're feeling. If they just think I'll rock up and sing, or I'm not sure, or I'm really, really nervous about this, what do you suggest? Whatever, you know. There's also a blog on my website which I wrote when I first started, which was all about breaking down those preconceptions about coming to join a choir and what it's like. And because people, you know, you walk into a room and you just automatically assume that everybody in this choir has been here forever. And the reality is the person standing next to you may only have been there for 1 week themselves. So it's just a case of getting in, chatting to a few people, and then listening to what happens, you know.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah, it's such a good thing. You've given all the advice that people need really to access it, or to as you say, you know, go and find a choir for them, and I think that's amazing. So in terms of your events, we know that, you know, you as you said, you're really active and you're always sort of out gigging and things, but you've got a really big event coming up on the 9th of September, so just tell us all about that then.
Oh yeah, so that's the event is called 1000 Voices, and it's going to be at Camp in Fairness on Monday the 9th of September. And the idea is that, so Liverpool Indie Choir will perform as part of that on stage, but then they will go and join the crowd, and then whoever comes on the night, whoever buys a ticket, will become part of the choir. And I will teach everybody in the room. There'll be lyrics on screen or in your hands, and I will teach everyone a song, and we'll do some harmony, and we'll film it, and it'll be amazing. But so it's taken that sort of collective singing up to another level, if you like.
Oh yeah, definitely. That sounds amazing. What was the inspiration behind that then?
I think we did something similar last year in Leaf on a much smaller scale, where people just bought a ticket and came along. So it was like choir for a night almost.
Yeah.
And it worked really, really well. We had lots of fun. And then it was sort of back to the grindstone in January sort of thing, and it just got left by the wayside. But the reason why we're actually doing it is it's for charities. So there's two charities, so Woodlands Hospice and Bradbury Fields, who look after visually impaired adults. Now I have ran a choir there for 10 years on a voluntary basis, featuring solely VI adults. So I want to just give something back to them. And we lost... me and my wife lost my mother-in-law this year, which was really, really tough. And Woodlands Hospice were absolutely amazing in terms of looking after us and looking after her, obviously. So it's about giving back. So that the inspiration was definitely to raise some funds for these two charities, but doing it in a way that would be beneficial to everybody. If one person comes and says, I had an amazing night, I'm going to go and join a choir, then for me that'll have been a success.
That's incredible. You know, you're doing an amazing thing for two fantastic organisations there, and in such a beautiful big venue as well. You know, it's amazing, isn't it, to have a big setting like that, and you know, to be part of something like the 1000 Voices. I think, you know, is going to be a very special thing for everyone that's there, to be honest.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably going to be the biggest thing of its kind in this city that this city has seen. So it'll be, you know, where you were on that night.
Yeah, definitely. And I was mentioning to you before, wasn't I, Tim? You know, we on the Manhug did the 600 guitars in St George's Hall last year with Timo from the Florrie. And to be honest, for days afterwards, we were all absolutely buzzing, you know, to have been part of this thing. And even after the actual event on the night, we went to a local pub, and there was loads of people. Everyone had a guitar there. You knew they'd been there that night, and everyone again was on a high and felt like they've been part of something really special.
Okay.
And I think this is going to have exactly the same sort of feeling for people, because, you know, 1000 Voices being part of something this big, you know, it's absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm really, really excited. I'm really excited for it.
So how much sort of organisation and prep's going on? Is it?
To say it's taken over my life would be about the size of it, actually, Dean. So it keeps me busy on a day-to-day basis. We've got 4 weeks today, so as of today. We're getting through it. So lots of social media, and obviously coming to chat to yourself. And we were on the radio last Friday, Radio Merseyside. So the choir was singing live, which was amazing. Everyone had a brilliant time, and a few guys spoke really, really frankly about reasons why they were part of the Pool Indie Choir as well. Brilliant. Which was really eye-opening and really brave and amazing of them.
Just on that, you know, How much do you see? Obviously, we focus on men's mental health because we know that men historically are not great at talking.
Yeah.
So when you're witnessing something like that, a man that's come to the choir and then they're telling you how much this has been inspirational for their life, how much does that make it feel like for yourself?
Yeah, I have to be honest, it's very, very overwhelming. It really is. I mean, it's overwhelming to think that you've made a difference to one person. So to think that you've made a difference to lots of people in what you do, it can be very, very overwhelming. So I have to try and sort of, well, there is no countering it really. It is what it is, Dean, and I take pride in that, and I'm honoured for the people that do come to sing with us. Everybody in the choir. We've got a fantastic mix of people. So I'm really, really honoured for everybody who comes to sing with us, and yeah, pretty choked and overwhelmed to imagine that, that everyone's got their own little story and their reasons for doing it.
That's it. It's amazing, I think just from what you've been saying there, how how impactful this can be on people's lives. It can be life changing. It can be so valuable for people. And it's one of the things we love and we celebrate on the Man Hug is that not one thing suits everyone. So hearing this again, is giving people more options, isn't it? You may never think that you fit in a choir or that's your role until you go and try it, and then the results are there then, aren't they, like what you're saying here? So absolutely incredible. So just to finish off, what we're going to do again is a bit of a recap on this big event and the socials then. So you've 1,000 Voices. You can get involved in that on your website and your social media. There's access to it.
Yeah, the tickets are also on Skiddle.
Okay.
And they're also on Camp and Fairness website also.
Right.
So dead easy. If you put 1,000 Voices in Skiddle, it'll be the first event that comes up. And there's a group discount as well. So if there's a handful of you thinking of coming, you can get, I think it's 3 for 4.
Okay.
So 4 for 3. Sorry, 3 for 4 would be a bit of a rip-off. So it's 4 tickets for the price of 3 tickets.
Brilliant. So you buy your ticket, you rock up, you watch an amazing performance, and then you become part of the performance.
Basically, yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Incredible. So my advice to everyone listening, just get involved, go and follow them on their socials. If you can get a few mates together, get along for this event, because I think it's something that you'll feel is very special to you on the night, and to be part of it. And you're doing it for 2 amazing charities in actually bringing people together. So it's amazing. So the last plug for your socials.
Yeah, so Facebook and Instagram, Liverpool Indie Choir.
Liverpool Indie Choir, there you go. Tim, thank you so much for coming on, and I think it's worked really well, and the theme that we've got for today's Man Hug around the arts, but hearing how we can be part of a collective, how we can be part of a community, coming together for singing, how incredible it is for our mental health.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Lee.
Yeah,
really
amazing.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. Cheers.
Thank you.
If you or anybody else you know is struggling with their mental health, visit hubofhope.co.uk or download the app today and find local and national mental health support.
Please make sure that you follow us on Twitter. It's @TheManHug. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next month.